Today I would like to discuss with you the Shelsheles Shel Halacha of Rabbi Zev Wolf Leiter, and as it appears in the Beth David, the She'elot Uchuvot, which are the responsa of Rabbi Leiter. They were printed for the first time in 1920. 63 responsa. Later on, in 1932, they were reprinted together with another 140 chuvas for a total of 203 in 1932, when he went back to Europe. According to Rabbi Joseph Buchbaum, who was the director of the Machon Yerushalayim, he stated the following: the Beth David, or the Beis David, of Rabbi Leiter, 1891-1974, has long been recognized as unique in the history of responsa literature and as one of the most phenomenal works produced in the last 100 years. Well, you might ask, what is it that makes it so absolutely unique, so phenomenal? That is the Beis David of Rabbi Leiter. The answer is just about everything. I will now embark on a series of points which will make that very, very clear. When Rabbi Leiter first published the volume 1 of the Beth David in 1920, it was a rather thin volume, 63 responses, as we said before. Nevertheless, it created an immediate stir in scholarly and rabbinic circles. Virtually all of the Talmudic titans of that period in Europe expressed their absolute astonishment at Rabbi Leiter's phenomenal recall of the entire corpus of Talmudic literature, alongside his encyclopedic memory and knowledge of the responsa literature. His exhaustive discussions with many, many, many sources were described by this elite group of halachic greats as unparalleled. It's even more astonishing when you realize that Rabbi Leiter's 63 responsa, 45 of them were written before he was at the age of 20. Many of them were written at the age of 16 to 18. And there were several of them, more than several, between the ages of 12 and 14. It was rather phenomenal in that regard, and unusual, unique perhaps. After the issuance of the first Beth David in 1920, many, many authors of She'elot Uchuvos responsa and authorities themselves would quote this Beth David with the many sources that he brings down to decide situations which were similar in their own venues as authoritative. An interesting highlight. There was a Dr. Kister, Justice Kister, on the Israeli Supreme Court, and he was a Talmud Chacham also. he, at one point, was asked to be a member, an honorary member of a group honoring Rabbi Leiter in his later years in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And he sent in a letter, and he mentioned that Rabbi Leiter's responsum were quoted. He mentioned two responsum, which were quoted in the deliberations of the Israeli Supreme Court, the Bezin Elyon. One of them was number 6, and another one was number 172 in the second portion of the Beth David printed in 1932. They were on issues that there was virtually no other real authoritative source, and Rabbi Leiter, because of his tremendous recall and encyclopedic knowledge, brought down sources for the issue being discussed. The interesting point is that I, his son, his youngest son, Ben Zekunim, looked up these responsum, and they were written right around the time when Rabbi Wolf Leiter, was about 16 years old, barely. Okay? So that's somewhat unique and somewhat amazing. In addition to what I've just told you, there is something I would like to entitle a series which explain of reasons, that is, a series of reasons that explain what Rabbi Buxbaum has said. And I'll preface it with a title of The Glory of Our People, okay? Number 1, there is something called integrity. There's an outspoken, how should we say, nature that he revealed in dealing with issues that some less courageous souls would paper over. In number 39 of the Beth David, the adversaries had come before a Bet Din. And in the middle of the discussions that went on between these two Jewish adversaries before the Bet Din, before the court, the Jewish court of law, it came out that there was a little bit of hanky-panky going on, and there may have been some stealing from non-Jews involved by these two people. The rabbi who sends this in as a question to Rabbi Wolf Leiter asks, is the Bet Din obligated to tell these two adversaries, you're not behaving properly? Besides the actual, nitty-gritty of the din. But should they venture into this area and tell them? Or may they remain silent? The rabbi who is questioning Rabbi Wolf Leiter indicates from his sources that he believes that they're not obligated. The Brethren can keep their mouths shut. They don't have to get involved in everything. Well, Rabbi Leiter says the exact opposite. He marshals sources to show that this is also prohibited mina Torah. It's a biblical prohibition. And that they must tell the people that they're doing something wrong. They're doing something that is inappropriate. And not only that, they also must be very, very forceful in doing this. Rabbi Leiter shows, besides the fact that stealing from non-Jews is a biblical prohibition, it's also something that the other party asking the question and marshaling sources in the opposite direction, that they can keep quiet to Bezin. He shows those sources are not being quoted correctly. And according to even your sources, Rabbi, that you're asking me the question, you're wrong. Absolutely. Rabbi Leiter goes on to state that there is a very, very blistering citation that should be noted in the Kafter B'Ferach, a very early authority. Quote, I'll read it to you. There is an absolute obligation on every Beit Din to distance people from stealing and the like, all the more so when it is brought before the Beit Din. It is incumbent upon them to condemn such actions and to chastise those individuals who err in committing such acts because of their view that these acts are permissible. Heaven forfend! To hear and be silent, this is the glory of the nations of Israel, and anyone who has no pity on the glory of our people so as to fill his pockets with silver, he will have to answer before his Maker. Conclusion of that quote. Now, this responsum, in my opinion, as well as a number of others with a certain cast to them of integrity, really must be translated into languages which are appropriate in the various places that children have secondary Jewish schools, so they should learn the juxtaposition, the putting together and staying together of halacha and integrity.